Again. Declan, can you hear me now? Probably can, because I turned the mute off. Man. at least it only went about 47 seconds this time. So I'll recap that 45 seconds. Welcome. Happy Thursday. I said I would do one of these every week, and that was my goal, but I missed last week, and last week was because we went to Colorado. So we took the crew out to Colorado, and we did a lot of cool stuff. We filmed a couple videos. One of them is going to post tomorrow, and that was on the Epic Evo. And then we took a little trip to Trestle. So Winter Park, I got some bike park therapy, and it was the first time I was ever on the Specialized Enduro. So that's getting edited right now. Maybe have that sometime this weekend. So it was cool to go get those done. But then I think more importantly, the big thing was to take a ride series clinic to Denver. So anybody who's been following along on this whole journey, I guess you'll call it, wanting to go to Colorado, to Denver in particular with the ride series has been basically a dream for a long time. You know, it started in Texas, and we did a lot all throughout Texas. Of course, Bentonville. You know, I live in Bentonville. It works in Bentonville. And then having Rob in Phoenix, those cities they all made sense. But going to Denver, it was the first time I didn't know anybody. And it was funny because last Tuesday of last week, there was only 4 people signed up. And I was looking at it, and I was showing my wife saying, man, I can't believe there's only 4 people. Like, that's kind of a bummer. I wish there would be more. And it was funny because we rolled to Ruby Hill Bike Park in Denver to check out the site. And as we rolled up, we were looking at it, and we came down, and a couple dudes were riding Ruby Hill, and they came rolling up, and it was just awesome. They're like, dude, Rich Drew, like, you're a YouTube star. And it was just funny. It made me laugh, but it made me happy. Just to know, it's like one of those things, you know, it happens and it's still like, dang, that's pretty cool. And then all of a sudden I got this feeling like, nah, this is going to work. Like this weekend is going to be awesome. And literally the next day, the attendance tripled. So we had almost a full clinic, and the site was incredible. This beautiful grass. We're out looking at Ruby Hill, and the progression of the group was just off the charts. Like, it was a super diverse group of people, and everybody did great. Everybody had a blast. The whole vibe was amazing. So very, very happy with that. You know, it's exciting to grow that business and, you know, forecast out what could come of the ride series. And I'm sure some of you are watching, some of the 29 of you from different cities around the country, maybe even around the world, saying, hey, when are you guys going to come to my city with the ride series? And hopefully soon. You know, I don't know when soon is. It's going to be relative, but we're trying to forecast what the growth is going to look like and come up with a somewhat solid plan for cities to visit based on, you know, the current COVID climate. We don't know exactly. So I would love to get to as many places as we can. It's just that build has to be as slow as necessary to make it be effective, but also quick enough to get out to the people that want to get it. So we're getting there. You know, I have some things in the works, but, you know, part of it too, and I have no problem saying this, is it can only grow so quickly because anybody who's going to work with me has to be a fairly accomplished rider, and they have to have an incredible personality, and they have to have an ability to convey the message. Now, for somebody to lead one of these events, only my brother and I have done that. And so my thought process is, well, that person has to be as competent a rider as we are, first and foremost, but they have to have a personality that we are comfortable that they will get the experience. Like, I know everybody's going to get better at a ride series clinic, but I also know they're going to have an amazing experience. So if you're one of those people, you may only get 50% better, but your experience is going to be 100%. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I know I have control over that. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I want to take it to more places, but what I can come back to is are you ready for a Ride Series clinic? If so, come to Bentonville, come to the mountain bike capital of the world. We'll get you coached up, and then you can go ride some rad trails. So yeah, the videos we shot in Colorado, first one was on the 2021 Specialized Epic Evo. And it was kind of interesting. I'd ridden an Evo a few times here and was still trying to make some adjustments. They weren't my bikes. I rode two of them that were borrowed, and then my bike, quote unquote, my bike, the bike I have to use for an extended period of time, showed up. And we're getting ready to go to Colorado. It's an expert build. So it's I think it's $5,600 bike. I was going to take the wheels off and put different ones on because it's got very narrow carbon wheels with 2.3 cross-country tires. And then I thought to myself, you know what? No, I'm going to ride it completely stock. And so we went to Breckenridge and we dropped in on this trail called Baker's Tank. And my man Chase was leading me in. So he's somewhat of a local. And he was on a Ritmo. And he went charging into the top of this trail. And I only had two choices. I could back off and ride at a comfortable pace, or I could go Blue Angel style and hook onto his 6 and charge it. And I chose the latter and just went for it. Yeah, Baker's and Aspen, like right? Amazing. We ripped down Baker's. Wait till you see this video. I'm so excited to post this video because the POV looks rad. And I was just smashing things on this bike, hoping I didn't blow the tires up. And it was so rad. Like, Baker's is awesome. And then you go into Aspen Alley and it's like, dude, literally, he described it as a roller coaster for bikes in a field, in a grove of aspens. It's like, I'm trying to follow him on this amazing trail. And I'm looking around at all the aspens just going, wow, this is beautiful. So it was very fun. It gave me a really good feel for what down country really means. But I rode it the day before with my wife, and we rode from the top all the way down, and we were a little bit behind. So she had to go back to the condo, and I had to ride back up and get the van up at the top. So gave me an opportunity to get the country of cross country part of the Epic Evo. So spent some time on it, and man, it's a pretty good bike. So I'm happy to drop that video and spend some more time on it. I actually went and rode it this morning, and it's fun, like trying to get some more training sort of rides in. And so, yeah, like I said, probably tomorrow, I believe that video will post tomorrow. So yeah, let's talk about this 2-part Berm series. And it's kind of funny because when we went and filmed it, my expectation was not that it was going to be a 2-part. And when my man Brock sent me a text and said, bro, I'm at 36 minutes and we haven't even gone to the second set of berms, I figured we might be in for a little issue. So what we did was we decided to make it 2 parts, and I think it worked pretty well. Part of it is I don't script these. I outline them, and when we set them up where we coach somebody through, it's kind of like what happens. And in her particular case, we kind of hit on some things that worked, and I didn't want to limit where we were at the moment. So I just kept pushing them and let them grow. So that first one was nearly 30. The second one was only 10. Once we got to the lower berms, it was a little bit different, and it was a little bit more, I think, precise in that the technique was there. Now it was a matter of how do we apply the technique in that particular area. And that, I think, speaks to the bigger picture. I've already had a few people ask me questions basically in regards to what do we do when the berms aren't that perfect? And I totally get that question. It makes perfect sense. But what I come back to is the technique is the technique. How you apply that technique in the given situation is where the nuance comes in. So, everybody's like, dude, tight downhill switchbacks. Show us how to ride tight downhill switchbacks. I'd love to do that. there's no tight downhill switchbacks in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm going to have to get myself in a place that has tight downhill switchbacks. Now, don't worry, because we're going to do that at the end of October. So October 31st and November 1st, we're going to be in Phoenix and we'll do some there. So Nick is saying back 40 has them. It's relative, Nick. Like, in my opinion, there are no steep downhill switchbacks on the back 40. There are some I can use, but what I want to talk about is like steep, like legitimately steep, not open to interpretation. Like anybody on the planet would go, wow, those are steep. And so then what I can do is I can back off from that to have it make sense for those ones. So that's what I'm starting to see is like I go do this berm video and I do it in this perfect setting. And the problem is some people can't relate to that. Like when it doesn't look as manicured as that, it's very different. So what we're going to try to do is go to the other end of the spectrum and do one in a place that's super gnarly and then see if we can get it to resonate to everybody else. Because basically my thought is that as a viewer, your thought process is going to be, man, that's gnarly. If he can apply this technique where it's that gnarly, if I can apply this technique where it's half that, I'm going to get fairly comfortable with it. So again, that's the idea. That's what I'm thinking right now. Nick, I'm still going to go to the back 40 because there are some that are steep enough. And I think that might be like a happy medium. And you're going to start to see the volume, I think, of videos start growing. So, you know, the last two videos, we're going to call those high production. I think you're going to start to see more kind of live in this in-between space where they're not as long, the production value isn't as high. So Nick, prime example, like, dude, I'll roll out on the e-bike with one or two people and we'll find an area in the back 40 and we'll break out some GoPros and film that right there. So it won't have the super sweet editing that Brock normally does, but the message will be there. And I think it'll make sense and resonate with a lot of people. So I came into that, I outlined it, and there was one thing in particular that I really wanted to hit on, and that was hip positioning fore and aft. So that spot where we filmed, I've spent hours, literally hours, sitting there watching people come through. And there's a couple common narratives. One of them being people come in and they shoot their hips back behind the bottom bracket and like push and steer the bike through, which is just one of the worst things you can do. And it comes back to the one thing I would tell everybody: keep your hips over the center of the bike. That is the most important thing. If you don't start there, you're not going to be successful anywhere else. That's just my opinion. So I had Brittany come through and her hips were not very far back. So I had to try to talk through that and get that point across. And I think we were able to do it. I hope we were able to do it because that's a very important thing. Like when you're coming through a berm like that, especially on a full suspension bike, if you're too far fore or aft, you're improperly loading the suspension and things just aren't going to work right. The bike's not happy that way. So being centered is the key, because then you're going to load evenly and you're going to be able to maneuver the bike as much as you need to. So that piece of it was pretty good. 100%. Also more pressure on the outside hand and point the inside knee. Now, see, this is an interesting thing. What I've tried to do, I've tried to get people to guide the bike with the inside hand. It's interesting. I try to build a relationship between inside hand and outside foot, and the hips are kind of the ballast, and that's where you counterweight, so to speak. You know, it's funny when we do the ride series clinics and we do the turning drills, I'm looking at people's hands and their upper body. And it's funny because I don't have a technical term to describe it, but when people come through and they get wonky, like it starts to shake and move a little bit, what that says to me is there's too much weight in their hands. And a lot of the times they're thinking about that outside hand. And so I try to get them to stop thinking about the outside hand. Think of the inside hand. And if you have to think of it this way, if you're doing a turn, okay, the bike's leaning, your fulcrum point is the tires, okay, and you're pushing on that outside foot. You're stabilizing that with the inside. So you have to weight the outside foot And you want to do that because the center of gravity is lower. If you're also weighting the outside hand, that's where you'll start to see the bike move up. So you got to be careful about that. So try to think about that when you're coming in. Get your hips outside, push down through the pedal, and guide with the inside. And this, again, is why you have to be centered over the bike. If you watch that video again, watch my body position fore and aft, and then side to side how low my hips are. I'm very far forward so I can lean the bike. The further forward I am, the more movement I have in my arms. So the relationship between my inside hand and the ground is going to be key. And in a perfect world, what I would tell people is, or what I would coach people to do is, keep moving forward. If you keep moving forward and the rear slides out, you high side, that's when you know you're too far forward. But until that happens, I would argue you're not too far forward. So finding that position, it's nerve-wracking. It's not the easiest thing to do. And most people don't want to do that. And most people don't know they can be that far forward. You know, Brittany didn't. When she looked at it, she thought, okay, I'm in a pretty good position. We showed her some video and she realized, wow, I can go a lot further forward. So these are all things to think about. And it's funny with turning. My brother and I have talked a lot about it. There's a lot of videos out there about turning and people are saying a lot of different things. And I came into this video set on saying what I wanted to say and doing what I do. And you can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, I'm not going to fight anybody over it. You know, I'm not going to argue with it. I'm just going to explain why I do what I do, and also throw in that physics and gravity are undefeated. And those things I think are important to think about. Physics is physics. Gravity is gravity. Like if I tell you I'm going to drop this, or if I tell you I'm going to let this go, everybody watching knows it's going to drop. That's not open to interpretation. So I think there are those elements in riding a bike. Those things are there. So yeah, Big West, turning a motorcycle is way different. The balance, the weight ratio is totally different. You know, when you're on a motorcycle, you are outweighed significantly by the motorcycle. That mass will do a lot of the work. When you're on a bicycle, it's completely opposite. You are the heavier thing and your weight is way more impactful. Like look at MotoGP road racers. The thing leaning more is their body, and the bike stands up when you're on the throttle. It wants to go straight. So yeah, there are so many differences between those two, and it takes some time. It takes some time and being analytical when you're riding. And I alluded to that in this second video. I basically came back to my take on it is every time I ride, I went and rode this morning and I was trying to get better. I'm always trying to get better. Now it doesn't encompass my entire ride. Like I went out and I had fun, but there are moments where I try to get better turning, or I think about my vision. I think about all these things, and I'm able to strike that balance. And I wish more people would be able to do that. It's supposed to be fun. So don't think about it so much so that the fun starts to go away. But at the same time, think about it enough. Like, you know, the comment about more pressure on the outside hand. Well, find a spot you're comfortable with and work that a little bit. Try to work the balance of pull a little bit off the outside hand, and don't necessarily put it on the inside hand, put it on the outside foot. So you're putting pressure on the right side of the equation, making a left-hand turn, keep it there, but drop it down, keep it lower, and deal with it that way. So yes, speed is your friend. Again, very relative. Like the berms that we were working in this video, you can only bring so much speed in. And one of the best things ever told to me was in like a lamb, out like a lion. And that was something told to my brother by a guy named Chris Boyce. So if you're watching and you don't know who Chris Boyce is, incredibly talented rider. And you can only bring so much speed into a turn. And how much speed you bring in doesn't matter. It's how much speed you bring out. And that's a very important thing to think about. You know, it's funny. turns are something that are very frustrating and elude a lot of people, especially turns that have berms. And then when they go downhill, it really gets rough. People try to come in low because that's the comfort zone, and then they go up high into the outside of the turn. So I think trying to get people to come in higher and drop in, I think that'll be the better thing. But nobody's telling them to do that. And it's not always the easiest thing to think about when you're stuck in the moment. So yeah, I hope, entry line choice is key. So when you're coming in, get to the far outside, get as far outside as you can, because then the geometry is in your favor. The turn, it's got a radius. You want to try to open up that turn as much as you can. Second is body position. Keep the hips where they need to be, fore and aft. And then, the bike lean in a berm is all relative. And as far as foot position, play around with it. I generally am inside up just all the time. And there's reasons for that. We don't have to get into that, but just try both. There's times where I'll have the pedals level, but I would say it's more few and far between. So hopefully that made sense. I wanted to break that down a little bit. Hopefully we get some more views, man. The second one is just not doing so well right now. I don't know what it is. I need to push it out on Facebook a little bit more. So, I think that's enough of a wrap on that. So I want to open it up to any questions anybody has now. We're at 22 minutes. We're going to go an hour on this one since we're stacked. So, what's my favorite trail in NWA is what Declan asks. Dude, that's a loaded question. I don't have a favorite trail, but I'm going to give you like my go-to ride, my favorite ride right now. So I live on the east side of town, so I can leave my house and in a couple of minutes, I am on Ravine Trail. So if you have not ridden Ravine Trail, my first question is why? What's the problem? Second is go ride it. Ravine's awesome. So it's right in the middle of Crystal Bridges. So I rip down Ravine. It's really fun. Puts me in a really good mindset because it's flowy. It's fun. There's some cool jumps. I love it. It kind of helps me get my mind right. There's a couple pretty technical or tricky turns, and I always like working on those and coming in a little tiny bit different each time to see what the outcomes are. So I go through that. It's a good warm up, and that rolls right into Masterpiece. So I hit Masterpiece. I generally hit Masterpiece a couple times. Masterpiece is the one with all of the metal and the big giant sprocket wall ride. From there, I'll go across the street and hook a right, go into Ozone and up to Hammer Down. So yeah, Declan, you guessed it, dude. Hammer Down. I love it. So I'll go hit that a few times, depending on timing, what bike I'm on. Yesterday I did it. I was on the Levo. So it's like rip down, back up, down, back up. It's great. So get a couple runs at that. And then I go across the street and I hit Barn Burner. So to this day, Barn Burner is still one of my favorites. I'll take a couple runs generally on that, hit those jumps, get as corked, get as much steez as I can, and then blast down Tristan's. So Tristan's trail is fun. It's just a fun trail. Like it's got a mix of everything. It's fast. It's fun. The grade isn't that steep. So you can really focus on pumping all the downsides to try to get as much, create as much velocity and carry as much as you can. It's always really loose. So the turns are very challenging. And just for me personally, Tristan was a young man that lived here, and he had a battle, a substance abuse battle. And, unfortunately he passed away. So, and I didn't know that. And I met his mom out there, and she talked about it. And it was one of those things that it just kind of put that trail in a whole new light for me. So, it brings a little bit of levity to it. And, I always think about that when I ride that trail, because I think it kind of comes back to what riding a bike can do for people. And so, yeah, I get done with that. I cruise down by the dog park, and I generally just ride back on the Greenway because it's rad. It's cool to just cruise through and see all these different types of people riding. And yeah, that's my go-to right now, definitely. So, All right, T-Fish. Hey, Rich, how do you think a rider's weight plays into how much suspension is needed? Ooh, is it a factor? Yes. I definitely think it's a factor, and it's funny because like 190, 200 pounds for me is kind of that number where you really need to think about, will a relatively smaller travel bike make sense? And it's funny that one, that's one of the topics that I want to break down with my brother, because there's two ways to look at it. If the 230 pound rider and the 150 pound rider are both 5'10", in theory, they'd be on the same size bike. So then we got to look at, well, wait a minute, that's an 80-pound swing. How is that suspension going to work? Well, what we're highlighting is that suspension needs to work to a certain extent for both of those people. Now, in this case, I would think it'd be much easier for the 150 pound rider to get it to be acceptable than a 230 pound rider. Not saying a 120, 130 bike wouldn't work for both of them. The 230 pound rider would need to do some more work, meaning they'd probably need to put some volume reducers in. They might even need to have some valving done to close that window down and move it up to who they are as a rider. So definitely a great question. And stay tuned, because that's one that we're going to tackle really, really in depth. Tips for manual to stop you back to manuals while getting shreddy on tables. Dude, if I had those tips, I'd be doing them. So if you notice, I've tried that a few times, but I'm going to bring my man Jason Blodgett on, and I think he'll probably talk about that. First thing I can say, I think, is it's a commitment thing. Like, you have to commit to that nose manual and then fire back for the manual over the table. It's commitment, it's timing, it's being athletic. There's a lot involved. The other piece is practice. You just got to try and hope it works. So yeah. BLT, have you hit the new stuff Gravity Logic is building on Little Sugar? What do you think? Like, what kind of question is that? You really think I haven't? I did, actually. I got the Enduro, and the next day I rode up there. I took it up there to kind of break it in. I didn't ride it up there. Let's be clear on that. I didn't ride a 170 millimeter bike up there. I went up there to just kind of test it out before we went to Colorado with that bike to make sure it's good. Awesome. It's just super impressed. Anybody that knows anything about Gravity Logic knows they build amazing trails. That's just a fact. What they did there with the grade they were working with is impressive. So I rode the jump line on the east side of the road, or it would be the east side. But then I rode the other side, the west side, and I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's just fast and flows a lot more. That's one of my favorite trails here. So I only got one run on it, but I'm excited to take it back. And for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's a rad flow trail, like a giant RC car track, but I could literally take my son on it. Like, he would be able to navigate it. He wouldn't want to pedal back out of it, but he would be able to navigate it. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And I'm hoping to get some more time. The idea was to get up there this week, but it's just been so busy. So I strategically took this weekend off from clinics, because we're going to go the next 5 or 6 weeks. We have them all over this half of the country. So I'm gonna try and get out there this weekend and give it a run. So it'll be pretty cool. So Lance, yeah, that's, I think, what you were talking about. Little Sugar, the power lines, I saw them building some big hits down. I think that's the same thing. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming out there. Mike and Caroline, considering Bentonville for vacation in October. That's a good consideration. October is an incredible time of the year to come here. The colors are absolutely beautiful, and the weather is so rad. So yeah, I would love to see you come. Private lessons and/or guiding. Private lessons, yes. Guiding, potentially. Shoot me a message, and if you go to the website, go to the rideseriesmtb.com and scroll down, and there's a way to send in an email inquiry. Do that, and I'll get you all the information that you need. But if it's Mike or Caroline watching, do that quickly, because October the weekdays for October are getting packed very quickly. So yeah, shoot me a message. You're going to love it. And I mean, even if you don't, there's so much to ride here and it's fairly easy to navigate, but we're going to be making some more content to try to help that navigation. So stay tuned for that. I'm hard at work creating these proposals and trying to get these ideas to come to fruition. I've gotten really excited about this platform and what we could potentially do. And a lot of companies are taking notice of it and supporting it. Like somebody said something about the Specialized shirt. This is one of them. It doesn't take a genius to figure out I've been riding a lot of Specialized bikes. They're a rad company. And, essentially they reached out and just said, dude, we just want to support, here's bikes. We want to help with some production. Here's some gear if you want to wear it. I mean, just keep doing you. And that's awesome. That puts me in a position with the small team that I have to keep trying to make this content and to keep trying to grow it even more. And that's part of why I'm doing these, is to get that input. Like every time we do this, somebody says something that sparks something up here and I go, yes, we need to make that. And that's the reason, I'm doing this, is because I want to try to convey as much as I can based on my experience. Like I'm cursed with all this information up here from years and years of being on a bike. And I like trying to get that across to people to let them enjoy the bike more, be safer, have more fun. Riding bikes is awesome. And when you get better and you can navigate things that once scared you, it's even more fun. So yeah. So what else do we got? Ethan, taking your MTB class in October. Sweet. Where it jumps from one berm to the next. Ha ha ha, like a hip. That's a good question, Ethan. Use the geometry. Again, the prime example I come to is on Fireline. There's one where you come in and it's a right-hander that comes into a left-hander. Think about the geometry and the physics. You want to try to match each angle. So in a hip, if you're coming off going right at a 45-degree angle, as soon as you come off the ground, you want to rotate on that horizontal axis to then get set up for where you're landing. So always think about that. You have to match, or you want to as best match what you're landing on. So like when we're talking about regular jumps, if it's like this, you want to land like that. That's the way you want to land. If it's like that, but it's sideways, you want to land like this. If you're up here or like this, that's bad. That's not going to work. So try to think about that. Damon, retiring in a few years. Love the trails. Central Texas. Yeah. I love it. I really do. I was just in Colorado, and Colorado is an amazing place, but it's hard to describe Northwest Arkansas and what's happening here. And it makes perfect sense for me, obviously, because of what I'm doing, but I think it makes perfect sense for a lot of people now. Is it growing too fast? Some would say yes, some would say no. The beauty of it here is you can be a little bit on the outskirts, and I think it slows down a lot. Bentonville proper is, as fast paced as it can be here at a town of 50,000, but it's definitely growing fast. But from what I see, you have a community that's pretty grounded for the most part. And I think even with that pace of growth, it's going to keep a lot of its identity. And it's funny because I had this conversation earlier this morning. I hope it will, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep it that, to have some sort of influence. But yeah, I would definitely recommend getting out here. Yeah, it's a cool place. Central Texas is amazing. I love Central Texas, Austin, the hill country, but it's just hard to beat rolling out of my garage and being able to hit 130, 40 miles of trail right now. In another 6 months, who knows what that's going to be. All right, Declan's back. What's your favorite part on All-American? Easy answer. If you know All-American, where it comes out of the berms that we just filmed on, it drops into this cool little spot where you turn and there's a pretty decent tabletop that people like to session. I like to stay to the right and hit double, and double out. So man, in some given weeks, I'll spend 4, 6, sometimes 8 hours there. Like I'll go and do 90-minute sessions just back and forth. And with the e-bike, it's incredible because I go through and I turn around and come right back. Yeah, I dig it. It's really fun. It's really fun. All right, what bike would I take to navigate baby head rocky gnarly trails? Steven, I'm assuming you're referring to what bike would I take of the ones I have. If it's genuinely something really gnarly, at this point, I'm probably grabbing the Enduro or the Delano Peak. So those two bikes, I would be pretty comfortable handling something that's kind of rocky and gnarly. So you ask me that in another couple weeks, I don't know, might be a different story. So we'll see. All right, Ryan, great one, man. How do you get past the mental part of progressing? That's tough. And that's another one that I want to tackle. Like I'd love to do a couple episodes of this just to really dig deep on the mental side and give my input, because it's very powerful. And that might not be something that everybody wants to listen to, but let me answer it this way, Ryan. Last year, when we went to race the Big Mountain Enduro Series, we were going to New Mexico, we were going to Colorado, we were going to Big Sky, Montana, places where there were actually mountains. There were going to be long, sustained descents. And in addition, we were going to be at altitude. And so my game plan going in was I can't compete with anybody who has time there. I'm not acclimated to the elevation, and I don't have any sustained descents. I can't prepare my mind and my body for the demands of that. So what I can do is I can go in and I can think my way to doing well. And what I mean by that is when I got to Santa Fe, I rode about 80 to 85%. I knew I could ride faster, but the problem was if I went faster, I would start to get tense and my heart rate would go up. So what I said is, if my heart rate gets too high, it's over. I'm going to be in a very bad place and I could potentially crash. So if I can stay below that level and ride as good as I possibly can at that level, that's my best opportunity. Is it going to be as fast as somebody who's used to the terrain and elevation? Probably not. But again, in my mind, I couldn't ride that fast. So I had to do everything I could do and hope that it was enough, hope that somebody else made a mistake. And in a majority of the situations, that's what happened. So the mental side of it, you have to put yourself in a position to make progress and build confidence. We do all these jump clinics and we put people in an environment that's amazing. That's the way it's designed. You're supposed to do well. We remove as many impediments as possible so you do well. Now, what we're seeing is people take that abundance of confidence to the trail and they roll in almost with reckless abandon and it bites them. So what I've been trying to tell people now is start slow. So if you're, let's say A to Z, you leave the clinic and you're at an R, like you're feeling really good, back it down in the alphabet when you go to the trail. Slowly build back up to that R so you're comfortable in that setting, then try to make that progression. So I think that just speaks to everything, Ryan. Honestly, dude, if you slow it down on the bike, slow your speed down, slow your thought process down in regards to how quickly do you want to make progress. I've been riding a bike my entire life almost, and I'm still making progress. It's a long, long journey. And the more you can be okay with that here, I think the better it's going to be. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. What else do we got? Really enjoy the descents, gnarly stuff. Should I consider an enduro bike for my next bike or keep my all mountain trail? Ethan, another great question. Literally just had this conversation with somebody. If I had to pick one bike, I would pick a trail bike. And the reason is if I had a 140, 160, or even like a 130, 140 or 150 bike, I can stretch that bike really, really far because of my background as a rider. And not everybody is like that. And again, where are you at? You have to look at a multitude of factors. Where do you live? You're saying you live in Indiana. I don't think there's much gnarly stuff in Indiana. So more of a trail bike might make it might make more sense. Now, if you live in Indiana, but you frequently travel to bike parks, maybe something a little bit bigger would make more sense. That debate's never going to die. That debate is always going to be there. It's going to be, you're overbiked or you're underbiked. It's all relative, I come back to, I'll acclimate to whatever I have. Like if I roll somewhere and somebody gives me a full rigid single speed, I'll acclimate to that, and that'll be what I ride, and that'll be what I have fun with. You got to think about what are your factors. What do you want to do? I don't ever have an issue pedaling a big bike. I never think in those terms. I rode my Firebird here in Northwest Arkansas. I did like a couple 40s and a 50-mile ride. It's a 162, 170 bike with 2.5 million DHFs with Cushcore. I loved it. I have no problem pedaling. And I just think that some of it is mindset. You really need to think about that. And not all bikes are the same. Like I rode the Epic Evo, 120, 120. I also have a Transition Spur right now, 120, 120. Those are nowhere near the same bike. If I'm looking for more of an all mountain trail sort of bike, I'm going to go with that Spur. So, it's interesting. It's one of those things where you got to look deep inside yourself. What is it you're after? And then look at what kind of deal you can get. That's the other thing too, is, there's a lot of bikes that offer really good values. Pick the best one. All right, T-Fish, love the come to TRS and try not to get better. Yeah, I think you saw that somewhere. I get fired up sometimes and post those things because I know that's not the case. Rolling Dirty Overland. Dude, I'm coming to Phoenix. I'm not going to let Rob get that one solo. Not a chance. I haven't been to Phoenix in a while, so I am definitely coming out for that one, and I think you're probably going to see a lot more. Not a lot more. You're going to see a few more probably later in the year and the beginning of next year. Down the road, Rob probably will break out with some of those solo as we bring some people in, but it's going to be a little bit of time. Jeff's moving from Simi to Bentonville. Jeff, I don't know if you know this, dude, but I went from 3rd grade to 8th grade in Simi, actually. Awesome spot. Had a lot of fun out there, and it's just, I haven't been back. I rode Rocky Peak years ago, and seeing all the videos now, oh man, I can't wait. So I think you'd love your LaSalle here. It's a rad bike, and I'm not saying you don't need to convince your wife that a 120, 140-ish bike would be good, but it's one of those things. I don't know. I think you'd appreciate it here. You're going to get in shape. There's no uphill here like there is there, Jeff. It's different. It's short and punchy here. So I would say don't worry about it. Embrace it when you get here. And if you really feel like you need something smaller, heck, dude, reach out to me when you get here. I'll give you something smaller, and you can see how it feels and what your experience is. So I'm excited, man. Safe travels here. You're going to love it. It's a cool place to live. Declan, of course, I know Tegan, and yes, he can shred. All right, Epic MTB in San Antone. Could you share some tips on gap jumps? Ooh. Yeah, I can. This is an interesting one. Everybody, you got to understand this and really think about this. Gap jumps, it's the mental component that gets a lot of people. So what I come back to is try to put yourself in the best position to deal with that. And how you deal with that is you get confidence in creating lift. So when you're looking at a gap jump, the problem is I don't want to short it. And what people do is they compensate and bring a ton of speed in. They load hard and get bucked generally, go way past the landing and land on their face and break a collarbone. If you can find a way to be comfortable bringing in relatively just enough speed. So this is an important thing. When I look at a gap jump and I look at the transition, I have enough experience that generally that equation makes sense to me. There's a little bit of nuance to it, but if you don't know that number, like if you look at a gap jump and you're like, man, I have no idea really what speed or anything like that, my best advice is don't hit that gap jump. You should not be. That's telling you shouldn't hit it. Go find a tabletop where you can get comfortable with that transition and maximizing or minimizing your lift. And this is very important. This is what we do at the Ride Series. This is why we have the Ride Series set up the way we do. We want to give you one set of factors and have you get comfortable with that MTB hopper. The MTB hopper is amazing because it's very gradual, it's longer, it's almost perfect for teaching. When you understand the energy being created and you're comfortable with it, and we see some repetition, we see some consistency, that's when we tell people, now slow down, bring your speed down, but go the same distance. And I kind of look at it and go, wait a minute, how can I do that? How you can do that is by creating more lift. You're more aggressive, preloading in and opening up with your body. You're driving through your heels to go up. Because check this out, amazing. If you go higher as you're traveling in space, you're going to go farther. So when I'm looking at that gap jump that I'm not completely sure about, what I'm trying to do is create more lift. I would rather come in, get higher, and come up a little short than come in way too fast, get bucked, and land on the nose, and then do a giant lip skid to a broken collarbone. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. That's one of those things that we could talk about that for a long, long time. So, all right, what else? What else do we got? What trails are in the Arkansas Enduro? Man, it changes all the time. There's a lot, Blowing Springs. We use some there in the back 40, Kohler, all that stuff. So yeah. Back to that. Find some tabletops. And that's the great thing about here is we have these tabletops everywhere. And I tell people, find a tabletop and come in slower, load into the heels. And I have some amazing videos that I'm going to post. So I'm going to post them probably later today on Instagram. So keep your eyes open for that. I'm going to post some slow-mos from the clinic in Denver that talk about this. Think about the takeoff, okay? And you have that ramp. So many people lift the bike when they're coming off a jump. Don't lift the bike. Never lift the bike. When you lift the bike, you generally go to one side or the other. So if you're listing to one side, it's because either you're lifting the bike or you're opening up way too soon and your arms are topping out. Don't lift the bike. Think about driving your heels all the way through. So I'm going to give everybody some gold right here. When you're on a jump, the takeoff, it's not over when the front wheel comes off. It's over when the rear wheel comes off. So if you think about driving your heels down all the way through the takeoff with your torso back, the bike has no choice but to go up. Then you decide when you rotate forward, roll your toes down, everything else is going to follow. You'll nose it right in where you want. Now, easy for me to say because I'm used to it, but it all takes time. And that's why, again, bringing it back to the Ride Series and the MTB hopper, when people get comfortable with the ramp at a certain distance, then we back it up a little bit. We tell them, come in with the same speed. They land a little short, and by nature, they bring in a little bit more speed or they load a little bit harder, and they get back to where they were. So we can slowly open it up, and you can very slowly get comfortable with, what do I need to do? Then we start bouncing them between hoppers. So we get you just comfortable enough on one, and we put you on one that's shorter or longer. So then you have to make the adjustment. So if you have a jump that has a certain radius and a certain distance, and you get comfortable at that, you come in at 20 miles an hour, you preload and you open and it works. Great. If you go to another jump that's shorter or longer, the timing has to change. Your preload and open has to change. If it's the same, it will not work. And that's what escapes so many people. So that's an important thing to think about. All right, Steven said, you talk about getting bucked from too much speed. Is that because there's not enough preload at speed? That's one of them. Yeah, that's one of the issues. Part of it is this, and it comes back to what I was just explaining. If you look at a takeoff, you have a time window. So depending on what speed you're coming in, you have a window of time to deal with the energy that's being created. So the first thing I look at is if I'm coming into a jump that's very short, so height, actual height, that's a red flag. Second is if the radius is really steep in a short jump, red flag. I try to avoid those as much as possible because the problem is that spike in energy right here is really difficult, especially if you're traveling at speed. So what I want to do is I want to slow way down to give myself a wider window of time to deal with that energy. And that's what happens, in my opinion. What I see a lot of people do is they come in really fast, they get nervous, and they put their hips back a little bit. If you're coming in, relatively speaking, too fast for a particular obstacle, and you move your hips even a couple of inches back behind the center of the bike, that's a bad combination. You're going to overload the rear suspension. It's going to push back on you, and you're scared. You're in a defensive position, so you're not ready. You're not being active and aggressive. You're going to get flipped right over. And generally, that's what we see happen. And here's what I'll bring it back to is that has to happen. How can I explain that like I just did? I can explain it because it's happened to me many, many, many times. And it's going to happen to you. If you want to jump, that's going to happen to you. The only way you can get good or proficient at jumping, and keep in mind, I would argue, it's not your opinion. Like, it's an empirical rating. There's people that are good at jumping. I'm pretty good at jumping. I'm not great at jumping. There's people that are amazing at jumping, and it's not open to interpretation. The highest level dudes are who are good at jumping. Like your buddies that can clear a few things, I wouldn't say they're good. They're okay. They're decent. Being good at jumping, it takes time. Like, you can only be so good at something that you have a limited amount of experience in. This is very important. Like, the reason I think Rob and I are good at teaching people to jump is because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions in a various array of situations. If you don't have that data, how can I speak to you confidently on what might happen? I know what will happen because it's happened to me over and over again. And that's an important thing to understand is the timing. You need time. And the more quality reps you can get, but also minimizing the impact of the bad reps, I would argue is important. So yeah, I'm going to step off the soapbox now. All right. Tiago, I ride on clips, but after I broke my ribs on a jump, I'm considering switching to flats. I ride a hardtail and red that are hard to control. Man, that's a tough one. Tiago, I don't know. I ride clipped in. I've tried to ride flats recently a few times just for the heck of it, but I'd equate it to the way most people feel clipped in. I think newer clipped in riders is the way I feel on flats. It's just uncomfortable and it doesn't work. And my mindset's a little bit different. Like, I wish people would go into the whole flats versus clips conversation a little bit more bipartisan. And what I mean by that is one better than the other? If you ask me, yeah. I mean, clips are better. Why would I not want to? I want to be connected to the bike because that allows me to do what I want to do. When I recently got on, that Epic Evo that I did the last two Berm videos with, it had flat pedals. I borrowed it from a buddy. I left it on there. The whole time I'm doing it, I'm trying to think of where my feet are. So that's the first thing is when I'm clipped in, I don't ever think of where I'm putting my feet. My feet go where they should be. I think that's an advantage. The second thing is, in that instance, I stood on the outside pedal on that bike, flat pedals, and kind of started to try to twist my foot off. It didn't want to move. I felt like I was in a tear in ACL. When I'm clipped in, I can put all my weight on one pedal and twist my foot right out. So I think the ability to control the bike using being clipless is far superior to what you would do with flats. But again, it's my opinion. Everybody brings it back to flat pedals win medals. No, Sam Hill wins. Doesn't matter that he's on flats. He just happens to be on flats. People who are good riders aren't good because they are on flats. They're good riders. They just happen to be on flat pedals. So That's what I bring it back to. David, come to Fort Worth. David, dude, I'm coming to Irwin, man. It's close. Yeah, Irwin Park. Irwin Park going to be October 24th, 25th, I think. And heck yeah, the Mach 4 SL. Bring that thing out, David. Go to the rideseriesmtb.com right now. Click the registration button right down at the bottom of the homepage, and you will see the Dallas event. It's going to be at Irwin Park, 24th, 25th, I believe. I'd love to see you at either the 201, 301 is a great combo now. So with the weather being better, we're offering the 301 on Saturday afternoon, but you could also do the 201 and the jump on Sunday. And this is my statement to you. You saw it earlier. Show up and try not to get better. You're going to have to try not to get better, and you won't succeed because you're going to get better. That's it. That's all it comes down to. So, DW finally got that Izzo in. Woo! It's a good looking bike. I've heard a lot of people talk about that bike. So that's one I definitely want to get. I want to get my hands on. So soon, man, 56. We got 56 minutes in, and I didn't even open. I went passion fruit today with the LaCroix because feeling some passion today. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to try and keep this to an hour every time I do it. And there's a few things I want to get to. It is the end of September. We're getting into October. And historically, October is the time when the deals get done. And so I'm working as hard as I can to position this program to where we can get some help from people that really believe in what we're doing, that align and help us do more of it. So I want everybody here to understand that. And so it's cool that, 49 people are watching. I want to do this more. And if you're not following at the Rob Drew on Instagram, do it. Pick up your phone, follow at the Rob Drew. And I would love everybody here, all 46, man, it's dropping quickly. Everybody who's watching, send Rob a message and just say, bro, when are you going to be on the YouTube live with your brother? I'm really pushing to get him on. I love doing this. And I have a decent amount of info, I think. I have nothing compared to what my brother has. So I'm doing everything I can to convince him to do these with me so we can get on Zoom, we can do these, and he and I can bounce stuff off. So moving forward into 21, that is my goal. Get him on here weekly and record this and make it a podcast because I really like doing this. I love this platform, and I keep growing every time this list of things that we can talk about. Like there's so many things that we could talk about. Bike setup, coming back from a crash. My brother had a devastating crash, broke 8 vertebrae, 8. And he came back. I mean, he's riding at an incredible level right now at, damn near 50 years old. So getting that insight from him, and he's done it multiple times. He's done it literally 5 times in his motocross career and in his mountain bike career. So getting that is important. A couple of other things. We're working on a few different alignments right now. So I'm hoping we can kind of make some announcements on what those are here in the next couple of weeks, but putting some things together for the winter. Going to do a little bit of traveling. We're going to go to Phoenix, obviously, to do some events, trying to get to Southern California if we can, eyeing up San Diego right now, but also South Texas. I'm doing everything I can to get down to South Texas. I'd love to do San Antonio, Houston at some point, November, December-ish, and we might get down to Spider Mountain. So if anybody here is a fan of Spider Mountain, has been to Spider Mountain, or wants to go to Spider Mountain, shoot him a message and say, hey, when is Rich Drew coming back? Because I want to come back. And I got a couple of ideas about how we can make it really cool. And we're trying to put those into play. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm sorry I missed last week. I want some grace because I was working hard in Colorado. There was no enjoyment. The video drops tomorrow on the Epic Evo. And, underbiked, overbiked, Marco, dude, watch the video tomorrow and you'll see what potentially underbiked looks like. I made it work pretty darn good. So yeah, appreciate all the support. We're going to keep doing more of these, definitely. And everybody have a great weekend. Smile at anybody you can. Please try to be positive, and shoot me some comments. Let me know anything in particular that you guys want to talk about next time, and we'll try to make that happen. So have a great weekend. Peace out, dumpers. LaCroix.